And so it all is interconnected. And we as leaders often spend an inordinate amount of time trying to untangle somebody's experience in the past.
Our topic this week is managing change within your teams with two very experienced healthcare leaders. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks. So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with two special guests, Tanzi Buckor at Community Medical Centers and Kristi Beaufore, who is Senior Director, Integrations Management Office. It's a longer one, Kristi, so I had to look down.
Sorry.
At Sutter Health. And what I told the two of you before we hit record, and I want everyone else to know, you are two of my favorite leaders. And I really feel blessed to have you both in the room together. And what was hilarious is you two had not met except being connected through Messenger and all that stuff. So that's the other cool part. So welcome everyone. So this week's topic is it's around the whole theme of change. And so we'll kick us off and then we'll talk about it, only because it's a theme that's come up. I know it's within the two of you and what's happening in your organizations, but with clients that I coach too. So the greatest risk in times of change is not the change, it is to act with yesterday's logic. And so part of that thing is we are in new times. People talk all the time about COVID and post-COVID and life beyond COVID, that things will never go back to the way they were. And when we say that, it still shocks the crap out of me that what happens is we're going to move forward and saying we're going to keep doing this thing because this is how we've always done it. So, welcome to conversation. And what are your thoughts about it? And what does it do for you and how you lead in today's world?
Sorry, Tanzi. Well, I think I just have to acknowledge the COVID, because I think that's our new timeline now. Whenever you talk about anything, I don't think anybody remembers pre-COVID. So everything is what happened during COVID and then post-COVID. So that always resonates with me. And I think what's funny is when you think about that, we probably changed more in that time frame than we ever have in healthcare, at least in our lifetimes. So we know we have the capacity, because we met challenges in healthcare that we'd never thought in a million years we could do it, and we did it. And we changed every day, if not multiple times throughout that day.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that resonates for me is how much we've changed since it. And I think for myself and other leaders, our charge is to figure out how we evolve with the change and keep going. Change is not innate to everyone. And it can become a task for those that don't embrace change.
You know, it's interesting. I go back to, was it Covey who had the 8 stages of change, whatever, that you had to establish this burning platform. You know, I know ProSci has ADKAR model with the building blocks. And what I wonder about when you all are talking about like the COVID thing, as we brought up, is that I don't remember. I mean, there were a few things we had resistance on, but for the bulk of it, we had a burning platform. We had people rapidly stepped into change that otherwise they wouldn't have. So I wonder now, because it's, you know, I asked both of you offline, I'll ask again, you know, do you foresee that in the future things will ever stop changing, right?
I don't think it will. I mean, history has told us that it's been very informative, actually, that change will continue. And so we have to get on board or not.
Yeah. So that's what I wonder. And I'll do better at navigating between the two of you because our brains are all firing at the same time. So I'm like stepping in. So, but I wonder what this stuff is. How do we, when I look back at COVID, granted, burning platform, for the most part, people stepped in to change. I know the example I use a lot of times was physicians with electronic health record, you know, and we had the opportunity to be able to do video visits. A handful of people had stepped in to do that until COVID hit and it shut everything down. And so they had to find a way to be able to provide care to patients. What do we do when we're not in a pandemic, knowing that we're going to continue changing? It's not going to stop, but how do we support our teams through this and get people excited about it, because I think at some level there's still some people are thinking it's going to stop or slow down. So what do you do? Kristi, what are your thoughts?
I think one of the things that I try to be careful about is overutilization of tools or something specific that's in a book and referencing that, because so many times people go, oh gosh, here's that next thing they want us to do. And even though the tool is actually really fabulous, even when you think of like AdCar, I mean, that's just perfect. But if you introduce too much, oh, this is, then people focus on the tool. Oh, this is what they want us to use and not what we're actually trying to accomplish. So those are something that I'm really careful with. But when I'm working through change with somebody, I'm always really aware of trying to help them through what they do not have to do anymore as a result of the change. Because what I often find out is people are overwhelmed at the thought that this is going to add more to my plate. And this is, and now what am I going to do? I'm already working overtime, or I'm working double shifts, or whatever it is that we're doing. So I really try to work with, what are you doing now? What can you stop? And how are we going to make you better and more efficient, you know, through this change, to get people to look at, okay, this isn't one more thing that's going to be added to my plate.
Yeah, the with them. I like that. Tanzi, what's on your mind?
You know, I think I like to get people in a room and ask them, what do you think about this new direction that we need to go? What does it look like to get there? What ideas do you have? Because what I found in my during my entire career is that people know better than me. Like the team definitely knows better than me. So I can come up with the best ideas and they will come up with better ideas. So so I just go to them and they tell me. They and it 9 times out of 10, it is the best idea ever.
So
So
have you run across, and I think about that, because I think about if we don't come that way with engaging people, right? Margie Haganey would always say, you know, you need to get the fingerprints of the people on the thinking, right? So it's not just your idea, boom, that you're cascading down. But you've been through, I know, Kristi, you've been through a number of different leadership roles at Sutter Health. Tanzi, you've switched organizations and gone through. As you come in with this approach, and I know both of you to be extremely respectful leaders, if you come with this approach to understand people's thinking, what's going on, have you gotten, what kind of reactions have you gotten from people that haven't necessarily been exposed to that kind of leadership?
That's because there's always almost kind of two camps. There's the camp that just tell me what to do, and then there's the camp that is what I think Tanzi's speaking about, which I love, which is, here's the goal, throw out the goal, and then you guys, whatever the steps are that you need to, you know, get there, great, but this is our goal. So I love that. But there's always that group that just wants to be told what to do. And sometimes that's fine, but they can also be your biggest resistors. So it's making sure that you are acknowledging that group of people as you're going through this, and helping them to have a voice. So you make sure that as you start whatever the change is, you don't have that group of people saying, well, it was just fine before and now it's not, and nobody asked me. So definitely getting that group of people involved in the conversation.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting you say that. And what came to mind for me is and you both know my brain goes with questions, right? Is that I have curiosity around what would have people say, just tell me what you want me to do. And I think part of it has to be is recognizing the previous leadership regime style, whatever you want to say, is that they probably got their hands slapped, or it wasn't encouraged, welcome, or anything else if they had an idea, thought, a different perspective. And so we've trained them, or they were trained just to go, okay, it doesn't matter, just tell me what you want because it's less painful.
Curiosity is one of the most powerful tools. I always say, when somebody does, even if somebody crosses the road in a different way, the first thing that comes to my mind is I want to know what their thinking is. I'm really curious why they chose to go that direction versus this direction. And then you lead in with those open-ended questions. So I think when you're working with people who say, just tell me what to do, it's really being mindful of using your words and the curious approach with the open-ended questions.
Yeah, I agree. Tanzi, how about you?
You know, when I kind of approach people with that approach, hey, what do you think? How do we get there? Yes, I do notice. Well, I'll say this: most people are in shock. All right, if I could just speak plainly, most people are in shock because they're not used to that approach.
Yeah.
And what I get is a lot of side conversations like, really, are you going to let us do this? And I say, yes, we are going to do this. So that's that. So once we get past the initial shock, everybody, you know, most people are all in. There are people that I like to call my late adapters. They kind of sit back and watch. Those are probably the resistors
Yeah.
that Kristi is referring to. I do notice those folks also, and I just ask them questions. Hey, what do you think? Like I'll meet off to the side and just ask questions. Well, what do you think about this? I'll just get them engaged. I work the room. For me as a leader, I work the room when we're brainstorming on new ideas, new approaches on how we'll get things done.
Yeah, I think is there and it's interesting. Do you view change the same way? Because this is where my brain went, is that we don't know what we don't know with people and what's going on. And do you find yourself at certain things that in your brain you're going, this is no big deal, or this isn't really a change, or this isn't whatever, and then you find that you bump into resistance or some resistance, and in your head you're like, what are you resisting? It's like this is no change, but in your mind maybe it's no change, but in their mind it's radical change. Have you come up against, okay, so you're head bobbing.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
do you do?
I would say I love change. Probably figured that out by now. So
Yeah.
what I've had to realize is that most people aren't like me. And I will not think that something is a big change, but it's a big change for someone. It'll be just like, hey, we'll just change the color from green to red. Big change disrupts an entire workflow of
Yeah.
someone we have not thought about. And so I usually have to sit back and think, wow, I didn't realize that this was really such a big change. But then the thing that comes to mind for me is thinking about, okay, why is this person resisting? And now I'm thinking about, okay, what's going on beneath those levels? Like what kind of experience has this person had? And I'm curious about that. And so then I dig into that to understand where a person may or may not be.
Your brain is taking me back to the results pyramid. It's so
I
funny
know.
because we've all got Sutter Health in common. And there was a recent post on LinkedIn that Sutter had done some training, and I think it was John Dotson had posted something. And on the side of people's desks or the tables was the outline image of the triangle with different levels. There
Yeah.
were no words in there. And I'm like, it is alive and thriving at
Yes.
that. But it is for those of you who don't know, Kristi or Tanzi, you want to explain it so I'm not the only voice talking?
With the results pyramid?
Yeah.
The beliefs that drive your experiences, that lead to actions that end up as a result. So we always talk about what are those. It's really important to understand the beliefs we hold dear, which shapes those experiences. And then ultimately you react and have actions based on that, and then you end up with that result. In some cases, great, because the belief is great, the experience has been great, the way you maneuver it's great, so you have a great outcome. But if you're somebody who looks at that belief and you say, every time Michelle wants to change something, this is what happens, this is their experience, then the action that they choose to take and the result are going to be much different than if they have experience.
Yeah. Tanzi, I think at one point you were going to put a poster of the results pyramid on your office, right?
It was just applicable to every area, every decision that I was making. I wanted to keep it front and center. It really does make a difference. When you look at and approach, different obstacles, decisions, things that we come up against, it really does help to think about that, to get down to the experience so that you can understand why something is happening a certain way or why
Yeah.
is showing up the way that they're showing up, and it helps us control the way we react also.
Mhm.
Right? 'Cause then
I
we
think
shift our
part of it too, when I think about it, it's creating awareness, planting seeds, if you will, in other people, right? So we can use it as awareness to know how to lead better. So are we just dealing with the top two of the pyramid? But in other words, we want different outcomes, so we're going to tell people don't do that anymore. Do this instead,
Right.
right? And then it's great while we're watching them. We're Hawkeye, everything's great. They're doing what they're supposed to do, and then we turn our backs to go to the next thing, and it falls apart. And
Yeah.
we're like, what the frick happened? And the thing is, the results pyramid for me is root cause analysis of people, right? So it creates awareness that we can't just do the top two things.
Right.
But I think the other part of it is it helps people understand and start to look internally what could be getting in the way of them making change or doing things differently. And I think that's the powerful piece as well, similar to stories, right? We don't get angry and upset about the stories we tell ourselves, or what? We don't get angry and upset about what people say and do to us. We get angry and upset about the story we tell ourselves as to why they're doing it. And so I think when I share that with people, then that creates awareness for them that instead of me just telling them it's your story, all of a sudden we can kind of self audit. Have you found that to
I
where it
love the,
starts getting legs and growing and people start
well, and
noticing?
what you say is the storytelling piece, because we've talked about that, you know, in the
Yeah.
past. What's the story that you're telling yourself? But also when you talk about you know, the pyramid, and even when people say, you know, if I come to you, Michelle, and I say, Tansy thinks or has this belief, this is what I do. The first thing that I always try to coach people on is, what do you think that experience has been for Tansy? Why do you think she believes the way that she believes? And then you can have that conversation and really kind of talk through it. So I do love the idea of using the results pyramid with people and really kind of going to the core as to what their beliefs are, what they think others' beliefs are of how they show up in their day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was talking to somebody the other day and talking, i.e. coaching. And it came up around that thing of this thing had happened and they believed that the employee was doing something because of X, right? Resistance, whatever it may have been, you know, just didn't care. And so I think the simplest awareness piece when you talk about that kind of stuff, you know, the example you gave, Kristi, is that we can go to the employee instead of presuming we know what's going on and why they're doing what they're doing, is go ahead and ask, help me understand what's getting in the way of you doing this, right? And when we ask those questions to be able to hear what's happening and then change and everything else is going to be it, is listen for the responses. And then if you need to go deeper to your point to get to what the experiences are, to be able to shift beliefs or what that underlying belief is, that's where we've got something. So help me understand where that came from, right? So then we can start shifting things. But I think it's a really cool framework to be able to engage with people differently and have better conversations and ultimately better outcomes. So how about you? Tansy, what's on your mind? I'm looking up because of where on my screen is. You're here, Kristi's here.
Yeah, I was just thinking about all of the scenarios, the situations that have come up where I've had the opportunity to use this framework. I'm always surprised at what I find out when I get curious about what experience someone's had. It's never the thing that I expected. You know, I remember being uh, a younger leader,
Yeah,
and
you're still a young leader.
I'm still a young leader. Yes. I remember being a younger leader and just arriving at that, oh my gosh, this person is doing this because of this, and just being wrong. I remember challenging those stories myself, or maybe I should say becoming a victim to those stories myself, and had to really do a lot of work challenging myself and asking myself, what proof do I really have that this is really happening? And sometimes circumstantial evidence just looks a lot like facts. It really does.
Mhm.
It can trick, the best of us. But what I found out is it just wasn't true. And so
Yeah.
with that, I had to kind of shift my thinking. And so that simple exercise that I've applied to myself when in scenarios, I've been able to apply as a leader to get curious about why people show up the way they do, because there's always a reason. And what I've seen, it's typically not the reason that you thought it was.
It's interesting. I go back to it's the same thing with change, right? Because I remember um, there was change at Sutter Health at one point that we were going through, and it was while I was on the improvement team. And someone on the team had made some comment because they had been process improvement consultants, had been in that, line of business for a long time. And basically made the statement, well, we've all been through this kind of stuff before, like, possible rifts and all that. And I'm like, have we? It's like, because I hadn't been through that before, and the reality of it is if you had been through it before, you immediately went to the end state scenario that you thought it was going to play out to be. If you hadn't been through it before, you didn't necessarily go there. Right. So I think that's it with any of the change too, is that have we had people that when messages got cascaded down about cost containment efforts, they immediately went to connected all these dots to there's massive layoffs coming. Right. So now you've got people in widespread panic and you're back here going, guys, we just need to not spend extra money. This doesn't mean that we're laying off, but they connected all those dots because of where they were before. And I think part of that is important for us as leaders to be aware of, that when we're communicating what we think is pretty simple stuff, that we need to let people know also, to your point, Kristi, when you were talking about what you're not going to have to do anymore, right? Which is part of the WIFM, but to let people know this is what it is. It's not all this stuff. It's this. And I think people sometimes forget to bring the rest of the story along when they're communicating change too.
But
So,
to the point, what's the end of the quote that you used? Because what you just described is that past that people hold on to, good or bad, that it is really hard. I mean, you could connect this too, then that's their belief. Because
yeah.
the experience that was based in, so it all is interconnected. And we as leaders often spend an inordinate amount of time trying to untangle somebody's experience in the past and give people a new experience so that they can embrace what's in front of them in that change. And so we do spend a lot of time trying to untangle what's happened before, and people hold on to that. And it's really hard to let go, because for some people it really hurt at the time that it happened, and it's just almost impossible to think of it in a different way.
Yeah. The thing that comes to mind for me is I think there's value in calling out the elephant in the room about that kind of stuff. Is that, this is what we're going through. I know some of you may have experienced XYZ. There's some form of PTSD, if you will, obviously not the level of, that people have gone through, but there's some trigger reaction in there. And it's the same thing with COVID. I mean, COVID cases are, spiking up right now and people have COVID. Is it the same COVID that we dealt with during the pandemic? No, no. But when you say the word COVID, people start to get this innate response as if, oh my God, here we go again. It's like, okay, this isn't that. So I think it's that same thing as, I think there's value in calling out, this may feel this way. Some of you may have experienced this way. This is not that. So at least we can try and have their voices heard. Yeah. So I appreciate this time. I appreciate, because I think I know I know change is going to be a constant for us. It's come up enough in conversations and with people trying to navigate through that I thought it was kind of important to revisit and touch base with the two of you to see what you're doing in your worlds too. So thank you. So I'll ask, what one or two things you want people to walk away with around this topic? And I'll start with you, Tanzi. Unless you want me to come back to you.
I would say stay curious about what the person's experience is, or stay curious about the experience. I'll say that.
Okay. Okay. I like that. Kristi.
I'll go back to something Tanzi said, because I think we're all guilty of this. We love change, and I love change too. So as a leader, if you know that about yourself, make sure you're aware. You're acutely aware of that. So when you are going through something, you don't place your ease of the change onto your team, thinking not a big deal. We'll get through this. It'll be fine. Tomorrow will be different. And that's a very important piece to leadership, is make sure that you understand what's going on in the room for that change, so that you can help that team through it.
Yeah, that's a good call out. A couple things come to mind for me with the two of you, with what you just said, is as leaders with any kind of a change initiative, a lot of times what happens, because you're the ones deciding and figuring out what the communication and all that stuff is, you've already navigated through your journey of the change, right? For the most part. So when you turn around to communicate to your part of the organization what this change is, bring the context with it, and realize that now you're tasked with getting the rest of the organization at the place that you're at. So whether or not you're an early adopter of change, or it takes you a little bit longer, realize as a leader, when you start to communicate the change to the organization, you've already navigated through a bulk of your change journey already. So you've got to basically reset to bring the rest of the organization along. Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate this time, Kristi and Tanzi. And until next time, Leadership Soundbites, please like, share, subscribe, do the little dingy bell. And if you want to be a guest or have a topic, let us know. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.